it should be starting to work now. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, and welcome to the Council and Trade Union Joint Committee of the 1st of February. Apologies for absence.
Well, I think Sukminda may not be coming.
Is that right? Mary, Danny, do you know? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That would be my understanding, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. And I think we're all here. Our side, urgent matters, agenda item number 10, mandatory vaccine policy, urgent to the rules are set out on the front page. And I think we've had agreement from both sides that we put it on, so we'll do that later down the agenda if everybody's happy. Declarations of interest. No declarations of interest. Matters to be considered in private are set out. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any issues or challenges, problems, corrections, and so on? No, don't see any. So are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Wonderful. Employee side items. So who's leading?
Yeah, it's going to be me.
Welcome.
Sorry, I'm just, let me load it so that I know I'm reading from the same bit. So our first one was update on the business as usual services being provided directly by the council and any other on behalf of the council. So I suppose it's just an update on where we are and any feedback that you can give us.
I think it's fair. Look, it's fair to say, sort of in the context of the ending of Plan B, that we are still sort of continuing to take our cautious approach to the return to service. Obviously, the situation that we're in now is very different from the situation we were in at the end of the lockdowns in both sort of 1 and 2. So actually, a significant amount of business as usual activity is still happening. Anything that does require sort of additional risk assessments is stuff that is gonna happen. But of course, I'm sure we'll get into the details later on in your list around working arrangements for those members of staff who are based in sort of static locations or in office environments, and that we'll get into that. But effectively, we're sort of, for lots of reasons, continuing the pattern that we have at the moment. But we can get into the detail, I'm sure. Steve, is there anything you want to
add? No, I mean, we can, I think we separately, the notion of the work patterns is on the agenda, isn't it? So we can pick that up then.
Okay, thank you. Like you say, a lot of them are linked, aren't they? So obviously, are you aware of any other services that are planning on doing a recovery and changing their current way of working? Because we haven't been shared with any recently.
Yeah, I mean, our gold arrangements are such that we're only doing gold now, I think, once a fortnight, and there aren't any that I'm aware of that necessarily are in this week's cycle. I think we have one, if my memory serves me correctly, at the end of the week. I don't think I've seen any paperwork for sort of additional recovery program. So it's it's a holding pattern for the time being.
Okay, thank you. We'll obviously be updated as and when.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Obviously, like, this wasn't my agenda. Sukminda wrote the agenda, so I have to say that I'm reading it on that basis. So yeah, council budget, savings, structural review, all of those bits and pieces. Have you got any update for us from last time?
So I'll bring in Councillor Donnelly to talk just a little bit about the budget in terms of where we are in the cycle, but just in terms of the structural review, it's probably worth noting that today is the first day for Paul Martin, who's our incoming interim head of paid service. I sort of did a welcome message with him just a few hours ago, actually, that we're going to send around to all staff just to sort of welcome him to the organisation, to thank Judith for stepping up into the role of interim for the time that she has. Of course, she goes back to Executive Director of People. So that is now happening, and of course you have probably seen, not to say that you would have seen, but we certainly have gone to market now for the recruitment of the permanent chief executive. That process has started, and we hope to sort of have the chief officer's appointment panel conclude by sort of the end of March, so that we can get a recommendation to full council for sort of the permanent appointment. Clearly that's going to be clearly any sort of new chief executive and any interim arrangements are going to be periods of one of sort of change and transition, sort of particularly at the top of the organisation, where sort of senior managers have to sort of adapt and adjust to new working practices and new working environments. But certainly, we're gonna, we will want to wait until the new chief executive is seated before we embark on any sort of major change, if we embark on any major change at all. But what, of course, there will be is a period of maybe introspection, kicking of the tires on the way that we operate, sort of checking to see if the way that we operate now is the way that we should always operate, or if there are any elements of sort of culture and practice that we need to change to sort of make us more open and transparent, more collaborative, which I'm sure from all aspects will be welcome. But Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about where we are in the budget cycle?
Yep, glad to. I mean, it's slightly awkward because I was just double checking. The papers are not yet public for next week, so it makes it slightly awkward for me to say what's going to be in the paper to cabinet next week and the recommendations. But it's imminent. I'll be talking to Ealing Business Partnership tomorrow and organise an overview and scrutiny committee on Thursday ahead of cabinet. Be fair to say, we thought long, hard and deep about the correct approach for us to take on a range of things. Financially, things broke out. The local government settlement, which came very, very late, things broke out of it less bad than they might have done, but in a very bitty way, which consists largely of one-off grants, things which are not designated as ongoing, continuations of things which had been thought to be about to be stopped, and the mix of those things produced a better settlement for us than I think we'd expected to have, but in a way which makes it extremely hard for us to budget any further ahead. So the actual impact on us for 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26 of this type of payment is negative. It's not positive. Because of the way the accounting of local government works, because we can't make any assumptions that we're going to get these same pieces of money again because of how they have been designated, how they've been badged. So it's an awkward situation of us. So I'm not going to make the announcement about what we're recommending in the cabinet paper on council tax or whatever in this meeting, but that'll be within a very short time available for you to see. But we've reached a balanced budget, so that's good.
All right.
Given that St Minda's
sorry, Mary, do you want to come back on that? But I'm happy to bring in Danny. Adam's got his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify then that can we then have a briefing once you can talk to us about that and things like that? I understand the sensitivity of why you can't say what that is, and also I suppose, what do you mean by a balanced budget? So does that mean that the savings that were required for this year and things like that, or have we just put off some of those bits and pieces? So again, I don't know how much you can answer those questions now. And if you can't answer those questions, can we set up an arrangement where we can have a more detailed discussion about finance?
I'd be very happy to do that, Mary. Very happy to do that. and probably that's the easiest way to deal with that. You know, we can pick up something in my diary in the next couple of weeks. I'm happy to do that for you.
Okay, thank you.
If you get the team together.
Yeah. Okay.
Adam sort of had his hand up, so if I can go to Adam and then Danny, I'll come to you if that's all right.
Yeah, I understand you can't tell us exactly what you're doing in terms of council tax. Obviously, the suspicion would be, given it's a election year, that you may be cautious about raising the council tax. But I mean, can you indicate which way you're leaning on that? Are you leaning towards raising to protect services? Or is it a balance between that and political considerations? But more, I mean, I guess something you might be able to answer is in terms of business rates and council tax. I understand that the situation, certainly in the start of the new year, was improving in terms of collection. Can you update this in terms of where we are in terms of current year collection rates for business rates and council tax, and is that something that's better than expected?
Okay, well, I'll try and pick. I haven't got the figures. Yes, it's improving because COVID had we're traditionally very strong in collection, as you probably know. We're traditionally one of the best around. COVID certainly had an impact upon collection, but we made a very specific commitment, I think, about 6 months ago, to begin to ramp up a return to normal ways of collection. And so that is having the effect that we would hope it had. Difficult for me to say which way we're leaning, Adam, given that we've already lent. So it's a bit like in a quiz show where the quiz host says good luck after somebody's given the answer, and the answer's the answer. You can't change it. So no, I can't really say too much other than that. The traditional, we sought to achieve a balance between protection and investment in services and ensuring that we have resilience to deal with the kind of what we used to think of as once in a lifetime events, which seem to come along every 5 minutes now, which give you pause for thought when you're running budgets in a public service environment. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, Adam, you're welcome to come back.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I know you can't say too much. That's helpful. Thank you,
Danny.
Thanks very much. I had similar points there to Mary and to a lesser extent Adam, and also because Sukhminder's not here, he wouldn't forgive me if I didn't say, "Come on, you can tell us, Steve. We're friends here." It's not being streamed live on YouTube. We're not going to tell anyone.
Nobody's watching. Nobody's watching.
If you just send it to us, I'll judged@ealing.gov.uk. That'd be great.
We'll certainly send you an announcement. Most certainly. Look, we are in that sort of sensitive period between obviously having made a decision and the decision going public. We will make it. We'll certainly bring you in, and happy for you to sort of have a briefing, as is normal. It is going to cabinet next week. Of course, then it has to go to full council to be sort of ratified by the full council. But we're there, so that'll come in good time. Mary, I'm back to you, I think, for next one.
So our next question was around consultants, interims, and the non-standard workers. So I think that we could take that though when we do the management report on that, shan't we? And just keep our points together.
We can either bring the management report forward and do it now, or we can do it later on if you want. I don't mind.
Yeah, let's bring it forward because it's related.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Fine.
Okay, if I can introduce the report. So the report and the supporting document was requested at last meeting in December. There have been no significant changes since the last report to this committee, which was in June last year. So as at the 1st of February, as of today, there are 120 interims, consultants and agency workers who are engaged outside the agency worker contract with Adecco. This includes Paul Martin, our new interim head of paid service, who started today, as Peter said. In respect of 57 workers in the Children's, Adults and Public Health Directorate, 13 are actually working in the Ealing Learning Partnership, and 39 are for children and families, as has been explained in the report. And then as at the 13th of January 2022, there were 531 Adecco agency workers. Again, there has been no significant change since the last report in June. The numbers are slightly higher due to backfilling of roles in libraries. And just a reminder that we still have robust recruitment controls which remain in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Open for comments and questions.
I think there is a few from my colleagues and things like that. But one of the things I was wondering whether in connection with it, because that report is long-wielded and very hard to read, Andrew, you know, the detail of trying to work out who it is and who it's not. So I wondered whether we can have a discussion about how, you know, the posts that we know that you have to employ via the consultants, i.e. the tutors and things like that, because they're as and when required and things, are very different from the posts that are covering vacancies or being brought in for a piece of work. And I think that we could look at how that information, because at the moment I don't think it's useful. So that's just one point. I wondered also whether there is, so we're shocked by how much on that agency list, all right? So you might say it's no change, but when you see that it's whatever, £25 million every quarter or whatever that we're spending, it's just frightening and things like that. And we're never going to do anything other than be frightened by that. And we don't see that that's acceptable and things like that and everything. And we still need to do some work around that. So one of the other things that I was wondering is that, so what percentage of our workforce is either agency and stroke non-standard workers and things like that? What is the percentage of our workforce? And what is the percentage of what should be our staffing budget paid via that and everything? Because we, you know, if we're spending 25 million on agency and interims, then how much money are we spending on the rest of the staff group? And that, I think members of staff will be interested to understand how much is spent in one particular way. So it's not necessarily something that you can answer now. Well, you may be able to answer now, but it's still frightening. It's still wrong. It still makes us panic when we see it. It should make you panic, and also, and it's all the monitoring of it, and it just that list never goes down, and I just don't understand. I just don't understand what we're doing to reduce that, because we don't seem to be doing anything. I haven't seen any notice of any change over the years. And that isn't a good thing on the agency thing when you're telling us there's no change, because that means that we're still heavily reliant on agency. Why are we not doing more to recruit and get posts filled and things? I don't understand all those things.
No, no, Carol.
No, I was going to say, I think that some of my colleagues might have comments to make as well.
So, I just, if it's okay, sort of just on the headlines, you know, I'm sure we can probably find ways of getting you sort of that tabulated data, whether it's sort of percentage of overall headcount or percentage of equivalent FTEs. But I think, Mary, to some extent, like you identified part of the challenge in your opening remarks about this. You know, the ideal number of agency workers in the London Borough of Ealing is 0, right? We don't want to be in a situation where we have to have recourse to agency workers. You know, for all of the reasons that you and we completely agree, both in terms of job stability, terms and conditions, rates of pay, access to pension, you know, all of those things are all key. You know, the fundamental challenge that we have at the moment, particularly, like, is a labour market that is quite short. I think there has been a bit of progress. So if you sort of look at 3.2 and you look at sort of the overall numbers of agency worker assignments, there has been a steady decrease over the last few years. It's not zero, of course, and wouldn't it be better if it were closer to it? But there has been a steady downward trajectory. At a time when I think we all know that there has been a reduction in headcount too. So I think that is worth sort of bearing in mind. And ultimately, we all know that there are challenges in the labour market in certain locations. We're having to give HGV drivers in Greener Ealing a top-up payment, because if we don't, they're going to head off and drive HGVs for other councils or in other HGV locations. And the challenges that we consistently have in some of the professional qualifications, regulatory services, planning, where previously we've had sort of high number of agency workers, areas like adult social care, children's social care that's got high levels too. But that's as much about our ability to recruit and the shortages that we've got, and the shortages of people to do that recruitment. We've got a delegation, haven't we? I think they're back now, but we sort of had to run quite a large recruitment campaign for care workers in Australia and New Zealand to try and find ways to fast track them into permanent roles. But whilst they're not here, we've had sort of recourse to agency. But you're totally right. This does concern us, and it is a metric to which we always do want to come back to, and we always want to kick the tires to make sure that we're reducing the numbers as much as we possibly can. Danny?
Thank you. I sort of share what Mary's concerns are on behalf of members and us as a group, as employees as well. It is concerning because, as you said there, Councillor Mason, this is not going to be the case that all these people want to be on agency contracts or that. And also, I don't think it's entirely covered by the fact that all of these areas are going to be hard to recruit. We do accept that there will be some challenges around recruitment with social workers and care workers, but I think something that we find very important is that, given this number and the number that of agency workers there have been over the last few years in Ealing, there really should be zero redundancies in the local authority, because there are going to be so many opportunities for people to be redeployed when we have 531 people working as agency as of the last quarter. So that's something that we think is really important from an employment perspective. As well as this, I know that part of the report obviously talks about value for money and saying, let me just get it here, sorry, quote, that it's essential to ensure there is value for money in respect of the spend on non-standard workers, consultants, interims and agency workers. And I don't doubt that people want there to be value for money, but I'm not convinced, and I don't think my trade union colleagues here are going to be convinced that represents value for money, £100 million over a 4-year contract. I would also add, we discussed this in our pre-meet, that we were all quite surprised and concerned that there's no equality data in any of this report. There's no breakdown of the various different backgrounds and equality data of these people who are working and providing public services for your residents. So we would really welcome more information on that, because, as you know, that's a really hot topic at the moment, as it should be, and we want to make sure that this group of workers are being treated fairly, and also that they have every opportunity to become employees of the council. Thank you.
Yeah, Liz, I'll bring you in. I think, as I say in sort of my response to Mary, that that to some extent these are positions that we are in. Liz, I'm sure, can talk about sort of redeployment. I'm sure there are issues around professional qualifications and skill sets. We can't just sort of we can't redeploy people into things that do require professional qualifications, where we've got vacancies, for example, in regulatory services, for example, that sort of do require that. But do take the point. I think there is a fine balance, of course, in these types of reports between the sort of data that we obviously do release, and I'm sure if this weren't interims and this was your members, you would quite rightly want to caution us against releasing into the public domain anything that could identify an individual where an individual was identifiable. So there is a fine line in terms of the data that we can put. But I certainly take the point about looking at trends for sort of protected characteristics and issues around equality and diversity that within agency, and I'm sure we can certainly take that away. Liz?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, just to reassure people, the Adecco agency staff assignments are all personally monitored by me before they're released now. So we avoid releasing the agency assignments, particularly if we've got redeployees. But because we've been quite successful, the last lot of redeployees were from the play service, and most of them have been placed in alternative roles now. And the ones that I believe are left are ones that actually want to take redundancy anyway. So there's a very small number. So we have held up agency assignments where we think they might need to be used. I think the challenge for us, and I mean, welcome to talk outside this meeting, is that when we are advertising nearly all of the roles internally before they go external now, and to speed matters up, we've now got a Monday weekly email going to the whole workforce saying these are the internal opportunities before they go external, and they are open to agency staff that have been with us more than 12 weeks, which is probably the majority of the agency staff. I think our challenge is getting people to apply for the jobs. There is a skills shortage in some areas. If you're looking at project managers, ICT people, those sorts of things, planners, professional qualification roles. I mean, we've struggled to recruit into even grade 7 roles in HR. So we've struggled to recruit recruitment people to work in our own team, even through agency. So I think the challenge is we're very happy to take the agency staff on. And we've got an open and transparent process for that. We're very happy to hold things up and make sure we avoid compulsory redundancies. And we haven't had many compulsory redundancies for quite a long time. I hope that continues as well. Happy to, from Adecco, they're starting to look at equality data for that big cohort of workers. So I think we'll be able to share something with you going forward in that. We're also, as well as looking at the equality data, looking at how many of our agency workers live in the borough, because it's important for the borough that we try and offer jobs to local residents as well. So that's something we do. But at the end of the day, we can't force people to apply for the jobs if they don't want to take them permanently. But if I can't fill a grade 7 role in my recruitment team as a recruitment administrator, and we can't fill our payroll administrator roles when we advertise, it's really quite difficult. We've tried permanently, we try agency, and we're not the only service. I think, as Peter said, it's a bit of it's a candidate market at the moment about what they choose to do. Hopefully, maybe with the sort of change we're coming out of COVID and things, people will consider the public sector somewhere they do want to work. I think we've got a fight on our hands between us and the private sector at the moment. So I'd like to see the numbers reduced. I'll be very happy if everybody became permanent, if we can make it happen, but that's the challenge. Thank you.
Could I just make a point? Sorry, I've got hands up, but I'm looking at the stuff on consultants, and are you sure you've captured all the data? Because I know there's stuff missing off there. In fact, a colleague of mine got a phone call from finance asking why we were paying a consultant when it hadn't been approved by HR. So I know there's stuff missing off there because I know the project they've been involved with. So it just shows that, I know you don't know about it, but it just shows what is maybe happening behind what you think's happening.
If I can just come back in there briefly, Mark, then. So happy to talk outside the meeting about who that might be. Obviously, we can only monitor the ones that come through the interim and consultant process. So I do know that the ones that come through that process will end up on our spreadsheet. So, I do recognise that occasionally services don't follow due process. And it normally catches up with people, though, because they then find that they can't pay a supplier because our procurement team won't set them up on the system. So quite often we might have a bit of a lag with people that haven't followed due process, and we catch up with them when they try and pay their suppliers.
I'll ping you what I know about it, Liz.
We're happy to have the intelligence if you find out before us, if we've got the odd one. So thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, somebody muted me, I think. Adam?
Yeah, sorry. There is a position between agency and permanent in terms of fixed term contracts that hasn't been discussed, and I think there still is more scope to move some agency staff to fixed term contracts. I mean, obviously it's a double-edged sword with agency staff, because if you make them permanent, then it potentially puts at risk permanent staff, existing permanent staff, because if we're facing budget cuts. But a position of fixed term contracts is kind of, in some areas, it may be something we can explore more than we're doing currently. So and that may then therefore reduce the agency budget.
Liz?
Yeah, happy to consider that. And, we have offered some of those opportunities already. I think we need to get a balance between, service delivery and what they want. But yeah, happy to consider fixed term contracts still. It's one of the things we do talk to the managers about. So we'll have a discussion about whether there's any more that might entice people to move over.
Mary?
Yeah, I think that there is a need for a more detailed discussion, because I think the interesting thing is about recruitment, and that's an interesting comment that Liz made, that she said that she struggled to fill some posts because it's not necessarily on our agenda, but we've got concerns about some of the grades of some of the posts within Ealing, and we know that that has an impact and things like that. So that may be connected to why we struggle to recruit and things like that. And, are we, I don't know. I know we haven't got any money and things like that, but, there is some concerns for staff that they can go and earn more money elsewhere. And so there will be those issues and things. And we do need to keep on top of those things. So it's an endless cycle of things, but I do think we need to look at it.
Point taken. Unless you've got any more, do you want to move us on to the next one?
Yeah. Okay, working from home guidance.
Yeah, so it's basically as is, and I think it reflects the comments that I sort of have made on the last few, which is, given what we know about the future of Percival House, given what we know about the future of sort of the operational decant, and the way in which all of our lives have changed, we need to absolutely strike a balance between sort of holding on to the good stuff that has happened in the way that we work, but also sort of making sure that people have got the ability to come into the building if they want to come into the building, at Percival House or wherever it's based, but also as we sort of move into a more stable position, that people have the ability to do the things that they need to do within their teams. But effectively, I'm right in saying, Liz, you could take us through the detail. We have done a wellbeing survey. Some of this stuff, I believe, is being considered by senior leadership, and we'll be able to communicate some of that in some more detail, I think, very soon. Liz, when your mic's open, there's just a little bit of quite heavy feedback.
I'll turn the volume down. Is that any better?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, I've muted the volume. So yes, the hybrid working survey results are with senior leadership team tomorrow for a discussion around workforce aspirations, about what they'd like to do in the future versus service delivery. What I'm trying to do is get some direction about principles of returning to the office, so that we get some fairness and transparency across services, because I don't think we want to be in a position where one manager says it's like this and another manager says it's like something else, and then we'll all be sitting there trying to arbitrate what's going on. So we're going to have that discussion tomorrow, and then I'll be setting up a meeting, Mary, with yourselves as well, to talk through the survey and any principles. And we've started to draft a hybrid working guidance, but we really need some clear direction, I think, about working within the number of seats we have when we eventually move out of Percival House, about how it's going to work. I mean, obviously service delivery is very important, but we want to allow flexibility, because that's an attractive recruitment policy, to allow flexibility about how people work as well. So we'll be having some discussions very shortly on that. As I said, unfortunately, we had to move on the agenda with SLT, so I wasn't able to take it until tomorrow. But after that, I'll be in contact.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any more on that one? No?
No.
Okay, do you want to take us to the next?
So the next one was staff survey and action plan. So I think that is outstanding from some time now. The last time we did a detailed survey, and I know that we've been doing the hybrid ones. So how is that with? And can we have a discussion at some stage?
Liz?
Yeah, so I think there's going to be some actions, Mary, coming out of the hybrid working survey. So we've done it at a corporate level, but we're splitting it down by each director. I think some of the feedback in the survey that we've done on hybrid working requires some attention. So there will be some actions that need to be taken as a result of that one. And then our recommendation is that we do a more formal staff survey, probably in 2 or 3 months' time, just to pick up on things perhaps about well-being and other issues again, and then we can plan the actions around that as well. So of course you'll be involved, as you have been previously, in the sort of questions we're thinking of asking. But I do think there's definitely some things that raise some concerns on the hybrid working survey about some of the narrative people said, and you know, some of the things that we find challenging about staff not being in regular contact with their line managers. Things like some staff saying they still perhaps haven't got the right equipment to work at home. So we need to get to the bottom in the services of that, because we shouldn't be in that position at this, you know, this far into people working at home a lot of the time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so yeah. So the next one is schools, and I'm going to hand over to Danny.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks, everybody. A few points that I'd like to raise. Obviously, we are working on the sort of individual cases with schools HR, with Mark Nelson, and with other officers at the local authority. But I just wanted to touch on some of the trends really that are going on. And you will have heard me say some of these things before, so apologies, but I think we still need to do some work on them. So first up, the real living wage. We want to make sure that everybody who provides public services for residents in Ealing is paid at least that as a minimum. And I know that you as an authority, it's really important for you. Myself and Mary are going to be meeting up with one of the officers to discuss the ISS catering contract. But it's also come to my attention that there are still other schools that use other private catering providers who are paying less than that. For example, that there is a particular school, and I won't name it here, and I will be speaking with the head teacher about it, where they use Chartwells, which is another private company, and they are looking for catering assistants and looking to pay them at £10 an hour, which is £1.05 an hour less than the real living wage. And I know it's a really important point for you in your manifesto, that people need decent wages and to have decent jobs. So we really need to keep working on that, and make sure that schools are able to fund that and pay fairly, because most of the people working in our schools in Ealing are living in the borough too. And again, majority of those people, particularly who are in the catering, on the catering side of things, will be women working at a low pay, and in particular areas of the borough, women from black and minority ethnic backgrounds too. Another point I wanted to just make you aware of is that recently, with the local authority and trade unions, we sent a joint letter to all school staff to encourage them to be vaccinated, and I think that was really positive. Again, we as a union are not for mandatory vaccination, but we look to do all that we can to encourage staff to really consider that for themselves and for others too. Another point I wanted to make was regarding the staff survey that's often talked about here, and that I sometimes get emails about as well, because I have an Ealing email address. I wondered if we could look to have a staff survey for for our members, for school staff who work in local authority schools, because I think, you know, it's obviously a huge workforce across schools, teachers and support staff, and sometimes we can feel quite isolated because yes, we're on Ealing contracts as well as the contracts of the governing body, but we can feel like we are separated from that local authority. And I think we could really learn a lot as a council, as the ELP, to improve services and the way that staff are treated if we were to extend that type of survey, some type of survey, to Ealing school-based staff. So I think that would be something we'd really like to talk with you about and set up as soon as we can. Those were all the points that I had today, because we're going to pick up on a few of the others, as I said, with the relevant officers, and we will of course get back to you if we feel like we need your input or you need to be aware of things. But hopefully we can work together to resolve these matters. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, did you want to pick up any of those points in terms of future direction of travel on London living wage overall and sort of rates of fair pay? And then I'll maybe bring Liz back in terms of the nature of what we may or may not be able to do with the Ealing Learning Partnership, and we can let's think about it.
Yeah,
go
sure.
ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Danny, I think you're aware we've sought to engage you, keep you abreast. We've made progress. As you know, there are areas, and particularly in the social care sphere, where it's more difficult. On the catering, we know from the big issue that we dealt with that schools have independent agency when it comes to these contracts, and our role is support, encouragement, seek to ensure that schools understand the importance. And if local schools are paying real living wage and others are not, then clearly the market will push towards those who are paying the real living wage. And our push towards achieving real living wage, not just within the local authority and the people who work for it, but beyond. And Councillor Mahfouz, it's a big part of his portfolio to encourage real living wage paying right across our employers in the community. That's going to be a big part of what we do in the years ahead. On the survey, I think reflect on a survey. I think part of the difficulty with the survey is that if it's to be anonymous, it's going to be quite difficult, because the key things the survey would draw out would be, where are things done better than other places? And I'm struggling on the spur of the moment to work out how a survey could both do that and not identify where somebody is and identify where somebody is. Now, there might be a way around it to try to have a survey that provided in the kind of information that would be useful to us. But let's think about it. Happy to think about that. But it's a bit more complex because of the autonomous nature of the schools themselves.
Could I come back?
Do you want to come back on that, Danny, and then I'll bring Liz in on the other bits?
Is that okay? Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Donnelly. A couple of points. Just one might be that, I know you mentioned that schools have autonomy, and look, we're going to disagree on this point again. Yes, schools have autonomy. I don't disagree with that, but local authority schools can be led by the council, and we would encourage that you can do everything you can to ensure that they at least consider and looking at whether all of their staff, all the people who provide services in their schools, are paid the real living wage, because I think that's one of the key points. Often there's an element of ignorance about this. People don't, or some people might just assume that of course they're going to be getting that because that's what a decent employer would do, and we know that's not quite the case. On another point there about saying that, you know, the market might push towards the real living wage, well, I think it's important to note that lots of people who work in schools work in them because they are local to them, their children go there, the hours suit them, they've worked there for a long period of time. So it shouldn't be that people have to leave a job that suits them in all those ways just because they're not getting the pay that they would in a school 5 or 6 miles away. So we want to get to a point where everybody can be paid at least that minimum real living wage. The other point I had maybe was that if I'm not able to resolve the matter at this particular school, could I contact you, Councillor Mahfouz, with some information about that school and Chartwell's more generally, just so we might be able to work together to resolve that. And also in terms of the school survey, I do accept it's different than having a council-wide survey, but one thought off the top of my head is that maybe it could be done in quadrants instead of individual schools. So at least then you would get an understanding of schools in certain areas across the borough. So for example, there's quadrants. I'm not sure if you know or not, but let's say Northolt quadrant. So all those schools would come under that part of it, and then there'd be Southall and Ealing, etc. So that might be another way to do it. But I think it would be useful because I think we could actually learn things from it that would help provision of service, but also our members as well.
Mary, I see you have hands up, and then I'll bring in Liz and Baz as well if you want to make, if you want to.
Yeah, so it was just really in connection with the real living wage and things. So I had thought that something was going to be written into the procurement process to try and ensure that contracts were reflecting that. And I'm aware that one of the documents that you have to go through does actually ask for that. So if it is a community primary school, are they not using the Ealing procurement process and things like that? And if so, then these things are not getting picked up and things. And so that it's about monitoring those things. And then I was going to ask another question was, so how much progress have you made? How much do you know of how many of your contracts are paying London living wage? It was on the agenda further down, but it's now been raised. How much progress have we made on that? How many other contracts have been done since we did the successful one with ISS? How many more have happened since then? I can't believe that there isn't been. We now know that there is possibly one in another school and things like that. So, what are we doing to do everything we can to prove what you say that you mean to deliver, that we are going to work towards all our directly and indirectly employed staff are being paid London living wage?
So actually, Baz, do you want to sort of come in reflecting on sort of Danny's point and about maybe just again a bit about social value and what we're doing in that space, and Liz, I think if you want to then after Baz come in on some of the other issues that sort of Danny raised around what we're able to do. Go ahead, Baz.
Thanks, Chair. So first of all, just say absolutely happy, Danny, for you to contact me, obviously, and I'll reach out probably with Cam to the school and Chartwell's in relation to that particular scenario, in relation to the real living wage there. So, I think contextually, obviously, Steve talked about the situation in terms of internally and making sure that we are paying all of our staff, whether direct or indirect, the London living wage. And clearly we've made great strides towards that and looking to progress that. Before I go on to talk about the social value, just wanted to say in terms of the work that we've done externally, we set a target for the 4 years in terms of how many businesses we wanted to be London living wage accredited businesses. We have now hit that target for the 4 years. And obviously we're not resting on that in any way, shape or form. We will be looking to be even more ambitious over the next 4 years in terms of what we put forward and look to achieve. And that is obviously through partnerships with yourselves and others, in order to make sure that we are supporting businesses to make the right decisions, to get that accreditation, to do the right thing by their staff. In terms of the social value, we will be having a policy coming through to Cabinet soon. And a key plank of that is in order to say to businesses that we spend money with, that there is a bar that we expect you to hit, that we expect you to achieve before you can do business with the London Borough of Ealing. And within that, we will be stating very clearly what that threshold looks like, including very much obviously the London living wage, but also more besides. And that will ensure that we are setting that threshold, setting that bar at the appropriate level here in Ealing, what it means to do business here in Ealing. And we'll be looking to go beyond that, obviously, and raise that bar over the coming years. But I think it's going to be a key plank, and you will hopefully really appreciate what we're going to be doing on the social value front that Steve and myself and the team have been working on. So I think that will be something that you will appreciate in the coming months and so on. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Councillor. We really welcome what you've said there, and I will of course get in touch with you. I'm going to have a conversation with the head first, and then I'll let you know how that goes. So thank you.
Great. Liz?
If I just come in perhaps on the schools staff survey, I'm very happy to have a conversation, Danny, with yourself and with Mark Nelson about what the opportunities are. They have been, there's been some good joint working, I think, with schools on things like redeployment and that. So I think it's definitely worth a conversation to say, is there something we could help support through the schools consultancy team and recommend to them in terms of doing some surveying of their workforce, even if it's not at individual schools within the quadrants, as you mentioned. So I'll pick that up with the team as well.
Thanks. Councillor Stafford, your mic's open, so I think there's a bit of feedback coming from your speakers. So thank you so much. Mary?
Yeah, just to clarify, so Bassam, so will that include schools? All community schools? Will that include, because when you say business with you, do you mean just the London Borough of Ealing, or do you mean indirect? Because I'm really intrigued by that, because I'd love to see how you're going to say it. West London Alliance. Well, then we're going to hit the issue with care workers, aren't we? You can see in most of our contracts with care workers are commissioned through the West London Alliance. So, that sounds like an amazing statement, and I really welcome it. But I'd like to know who you mean business with us. What is that? Who's us? Who's us?
I see Steve is Steve. Councillor Mahfouz and Councillor Donnelly have been working sort of hand in glove on our social value policy. I see Councillor Donnelly's indicated he can certainly come in. Look, on the issue of WLA and the issue of social care workers, I'm sure it's going to get raised in the meeting later on in terms of our commitment to being able to sign the Unison Ethical Care Charter, and that's what we want to do in the long term. We do need to make a series of decisions about how we fund that. We've talked about what the financial commitment to doing precisely that is, at the same time as the challenges that we know that we've got in the wider adult social care market around care providers who also take placements from outside of the borough. And quite frankly, if we don't sign up to the London living wage for all adult social care workers at the same time as other London boroughs do who make placements, then we're effectively handing over money to private business that won't sort of pass it on. So there is that bit of market involvement and engagement that we have to do. We've been clear about our intentions, and perhaps we'll be even clearer in the coming weeks ahead about what our intentions will be, maybe in the next 4 years. But Steve, do you want to come in on this bit, and then Baz as well?
Sure. I mean, really, in a sense, Mary kind of set up questions and sort of answered them. This is, there are different legal frameworks in which we can operate. There are different legal entities that control their procurement. schools have a particular agency and legal status. The West London Alliance has a particular agency and legal status. So there are areas in which we, as London Borough of Ealing, will seek to influence, move opinion, bring people with us. And there are other areas in which we can simply lay down our own guidelines and expectations without reference to anybody else. And we will do all of those things. It's right that some aspects of the social care are complicated because of the way in which we provision the service. It's right that some aspects of the education employment is complicated because of the legal position of the schools, but we're not letting those things go just because they're more complicated. And we'll work with whoever it takes to work with for as long as it takes to work with them to get to where we need to be. I'm sure Bassam will concur.
Absolutely. So yeah, I 100% agree with Steve there, and I think that clearly, I think if and the point that Steve made earlier is about school autonomy, and I think we probably have Danny rightly having a go at us if we were trying to take the autonomy away from schools in terms of some of the decisions that they get to make. But there's a dual aspect to this. So one is about very much where we spend our pounds and pence, our local residents' pounds and pence in terms of contracts that we directly, so either in-house services or where we contract out. And certainly where we are doing that, we are implementing that social value, looking to implement that social value policy, subject to obviously cabinet approval and so on. And then we will be able to ensure that is rolled out with other organisations, and we can include schools within that in terms of we will be using our influencing powers and skills and support to ensure that those businesses, the schools, etc., are fully aware of the benefits of being a living wage employer, and why it would be financially beneficial to do so. I think ultimately, because actually for a lot of people, it's not just the financial recompense that makes them want to do a job. It's also the wraparound care, support, the health and well-being. The support for that individual in that role is so crucial, and you know that very much as a trade union representative day in, day out. So, but we'll be looking to engage with all across the borough to really up the numbers on the living wage accreditation.
Go ahead, Danny.
Thank you. Just quickly on that point, I think, like Mary, as I said, that's why I welcomed what you said there, Councillor, because that is really key for us. We know that in the past 20 years, more and more public services have been outsourced to private companies, and we also know that there's a trend of those coming back in-house because it's better for everyone, really, for those who need the service and for those who are providing the service. I just had a couple of points. I think it would be really useful for us to have a further chat about that, Bassam, in terms of how we maybe get that message to schools about the benefits of paying that real living wage. As you know, we are keen supporters of the Ealing Living Wage Alliance, and also we would really appreciate you using your positions as members of the cabinet to really encourage, and also not just encourage, actually to ensure that any Labour councillor who is a local authority, who is a governor in an Ealing school, really hammers home this point and really carries out proper checks and balances of that governing board to make sure that there isn't anybody in that school who's ever going to have the opportunity to earn less than the real living wage, because we do find sometimes we get our hopes up seeing that, there's a local authority governor on that governing board, and they're Labour, and then we feel a bit let down because actually we think, well, they haven't really stood up for the terms and conditions of fair terms and conditions. So I just wanted to make that point, as I think that's another avenue that we would really look to explore.
Yeah, I think just 100% agree. You know, as Labour councillors, we should all be advocates and for the real living wage, and that's in terms of whether it's as a governor or on a school body, or in terms of our engagement with other businesses as we meet them. And you know, recently, as an example, Ealing citizens asked us to co-organise a jobs fair, and so I said, look, you know, I'm not going to attend, I'm not going to speak, I'm not going to provide the council support unless those businesses that you've invited absolutely sign up to at least, you know, working towards the real living wage. And so I'll be meeting them the next week or so to progress that. And so it's that sort of thing. I mean, I think, you know, you saw the plan for good jobs. Recently we did some videos with some businesses, and actually again there was a business that was interested in doing a video, and I said, look, you know, sorry, you know, great, but you're not a real living wage employer. They then come back and said, look, actually we're going to sign up just so they can do the video now as well. But, you know, using the opportunities that are made available to influence, you know, in a positive way, to say, look, there are some real benefits to obviously of doing this. And I think, to be honest, you know, there's a lot of employers out there who are close to the cusp, or you know, or already there, and actually sort of, you know, it's just taking that final step for accreditation or that, you know, formal acknowledgement. But, you know, when they can be that close that you've been talking about, for example, Danny, you know, what's the financial difference? We can easily help them work that through to make sure that they take that final step, which can make, you know, such a massive difference to that person or those people's lives that work for them.
Steve?
Yeah, at risk of getting back into a legalistic ping pong, Danny, I mean, you understand local authority governors, that they're appointed in the political process, but they're not delegates. You know, they, once part of the governing body, they operate, their obligation is to the governing body. And obviously, you know, as political parties nominate, I'm sure they nominate people that they hope and expect will propagate the values that those organizations hold. But they don't act as delegates, and they don't act under instruction. So I just wanted, I mean, it's not to say there's a gap between us, but I do need to keep coming back to point out what the boundaries are of behaviour. But we're all aiming towards the same thing. We all hope to get there as quickly as possible. And I wouldn't want the meeting to take away the idea that somehow that there is a divide between us, because I don't believe there is.
Well, thank you for that. I personally, I don't think that you did need to come back and clarify that point, because as you said, I think we're agreeing in that people should be paid the real living wage. And I'm not going to change my view that Labour councillors who are members of the school governing body should be properly scrutinising to make sure that the school that they're a governor of is paying that real living wage. So I think you're right. I don't think we really are disagreeing on any of those points. No.
Okay. So I think we've all that being said, I think we've done that bit, have we? Unless there's any more. Mary, do you want to take us on to the next agenda item?
So inequality is our next one, and I know that the local authority is supposed to give us a verbal update on equalities issues, so maybe we take them together.
Yeah, very happy to. Liz, can I just first, all right, your mic. So yeah, so I'll just say a couple of things. So we've obviously taken receipt now of the Race Equality Commission report by Lord Willie and the commissioners. I think it was a really strong report. You know, part of the reason that we set it up in the first place was that we did want that independent critique of where we are, where we need to be. And I think some of those recommendations, some of the demands, as they put them quite rightly, they sort of phrased them as demands, which I think is entirely appropriate, are ones that we can and will deliver. And we had a launch event earlier in the week, early last week, where not only did I sort of commit on behalf of the organisation that we will achieve the ones that are within our gift to achieve, but we'll also keep pressure up on our public sector partners. But what we'll also do at the 12-month point is do what sort of I've termed in sort of discussion with commissioners, sort of via the team, sort of a citizens tribunal, which is able to have hearings in public, that is independent of the council, that can effectively put us through the mill. And if they're not satisfied that we've done enough according to the action plan and the things that we set out to do, then they can hold us accountable. They can hold us accountable for it. There are clearly like a few strands of work. We're going to take a paper to the Cabinet next week that will acknowledge the report and set out what it is that we are going to do in terms of timeline of responding to it. But there are strands of both external facing, internal and sort of policy work. I'm sure Liz will take you through some more of the detail of the internal work, but we know that we need this to be led. So I think we're going to be very shortly going out to recruit to the post of an engagement and equalities assistant director in the chief exec's team, who will, if you like, pick up the two key themes around equality, diversity, inclusion, but at the same time really try and help the organisation sort of build the methods and the channels through which we know that we need to also talk to residents. But specifically talk to residents who are the most hard, that we have failed over a period of time to be able to engage with in a deeper, meaningful and more meaningful way than we otherwise would have wanted to. And that you will see sort of go live in the coming weeks. There's also been some internal work. Lord Woolley ran a sort of a workshop and a presentation to senior staff earlier in the week. I think it might have actually been yesterday. Liz, I'm sure will correct me if it wasn't yesterday. But sort of set out from his perspective what more the organisation needs to do internally. And Liz is also going to update us in terms of the boards that should now be operational and up and running. So Liz, do you want to take over at this point?
Yeah, so Lord Simon Woolley did do staff briefing hosted with Judith yesterday, which was really well attended by staff from across the organisation. I think we probably had 200 staff on that, so I think that was a really positive message and session yesterday. We did talk about workforce equalities following the overview and scrutiny meeting in December, and shared the paper here. And I know, Mary, we've talked to yourselves about it. I think key things to talk about that have happened since that point is the launch of the staff equality groups now. Early days, we know, and we know we've got some challenges ahead, and in terms of those groups and making sure they're supported, and that we have formal re-elections of chairs and things in due course. So I know all that work is underway, and we've got the first, it should be in everyone's diaries, the first corporate equalities board being chaired by Paul Martin on the 22nd of February. So I'll be talking to him this week about agenda and for that very first meeting, and then hopefully that's a good sort of staging point for us to move on. Yeah, so I think the next sort of two key things on our radar are, I've got to do an updated action plan, take it back to senior leadership team, then it needs to come to Cabinet about where we've got to. So that's on the radar. Two things that are on also we're working on at the moment are exit interviews, which does have an equality strand within it about why do people leave the organisation. So we've now got the capacity to build that within our HR system. So I've tasked the team to give me a deadline by which we can get that up and running. And the other thing that I've now got, and which I committed to, probably a few weeks behind on it, is writing to the workforce, and something, Mary, I'll be talking to yourselves and trade union colleagues about those people that don't disclose their protected characteristics. I've now got a report on where we've got the missing data, because we keep comparing ourselves against our workforce data, but if we've got lots of missing data, I think that's a problem for us. And then at year end, we'll be rerunning all the equalities data around recruitment, seeing if we've made progress in our recruitment area, amongst other things. So there's a few things on the radar which are sort of priorities for the next 3 months, but we'll be engaging with you anyway.
Thanks, Liz.
I think some of my colleagues might have some comments to make, but
yeah, go ahead.
just quickly is that so I attended the session yesterday, and it was obviously, you know, very powerful and very good, as Lord Woolley is every time he speaks and things like that. We're all now fortunate to have heard him a few times. But for me, there's still, I feel, a lack of transparency, because it was interesting that the Race Commission, the stuff that has come out has shocked people to the core. It has made uncomfortable reading, uncomfortable hearing, and that you have to come up with a definitive plan and a process to ensure that you've heard and that you are going to change going forward. I'm not convinced that the staff group as a whole, and this is what we're here tonight to discuss, is staffing, have had that opportunity. We still don't believe that the report that was shared publicly from DWC was the only report. I'm sure that there was more. I'm sure that somebody has seen something that indicated where staff had evidentially given and stated where they felt that they were being treated unfairly because of their race or their protected characteristic. And, you know, some of those departments need to look at themselves. We can incidentally think of where those areas are, but never actually had the evidence. And I still feel that there's stuff there that we're not being shared with, and that we don't know where, you know, we don't know what our starting point is to demonstrate going how we're really going to make a difference going forward. So I welcome all the things that Liz has said, and, you know, obviously we are going to be as much part of all of those groups as we can do, so that we can help to influence and change and see the change come. But I'm not convinced at the moment that we've done enough looking at ourselves properly, and I'm not convinced by a lot of the stuff that's happened in connection with the staffing. I'm not saying that you haven't done a good job from the community, because I haven't read the report, but I can imagine that it is very hard hitting, which it should be.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, Kerry, do you want to go?
Hi, yeah, I can't find my raise the
No
hand
worries, don't
button
worry.
or something. Yeah. Okay, so I would. Okay, I'll just dive in. You mentioned something about accountable, being accountable, being held accountable. In what way would that be? That's one question. And then the other question is to Liz about the exit interview. What exactly, could you just give us, could you break it down a little bit? You know, when you say exit interview, in what, how would it be the process, if possible?
So Liz, do you want to do the exit process? Then I'll sort of talk a little bit about what we're going to do in a year's time and picking up some of Mary's points too.
Yeah. Okay. So just Kemi, thanks for that. In terms of, I'll just pick up about accountability, which partly answers Mary's question. Is all the services, all the directors are required to develop action plans about what they're going to do in their specific services. So that is something that they've got to do in detail. So we need to agree the timelines for that now and get those action, because they've had their data for some time. I know it's not just about data, but I think it's just a point to note. In terms of the exit interviews, we're going to give people the opportunity to complete an online survey, and anonymous or not, it's up to them. But anyway, we're going to ask people to complete an online survey with the option then to say, would you also like a discussion with someone about, you know, what you've just said or what you haven't said in your exit survey. So we will offer people the opportunity to meet with someone and have a discussion, because I think that feedback, informally, a lot of people that leave the organisation do speak to me and do tell me why they're going. And so it does give some insight into areas of difficulty or where we have challenges, which I think Mary was probably referring to. So we do get feedback from people, and we need to be more systematic in that. There's no doubt about it. And just on in terms of, we have implemented the casework monitoring and that, but I'm not sure, Mary, yet that we've shared the reporting on that with you at a high level about what the numbers of caseworks are in different services. So that helps us, but obviously it's not all about formal employment casework. It is about the informal, what happens for people. And I'm hoping that the groups that we've set up will be a sort of catalyst for us identifying areas of difficulty that we really need to focus in on, because I know we do have some. And just on the DWC report, Mary, there isn't a secret report that I've got that you haven't seen. I genuinely haven't got anything that hasn't been shared with the organisation. If anyone's got it, they're welcome to say so, but I haven't got one.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I think, and you know, I'll watch Liz's face as I say this. If there was another report and it hadn't been sent to me, I think there'd be heads would be rolling, particularly on this topic. You know, that you know, as far as I know, certainly there isn't. In terms of sort of, if you haven't had the opportunity to read the Woolly report, like, I really would strongly urge you to sort of have a look at it, but also just to sort of see the response. You know, it's on YouTube, and sort of the contributions that were made by the commissioners. I sort of responded to it on behalf of the organisation, and we had the police there, and we had sort of various other partners who sort of made contributions, and there was a Q&A session and a sort of a wide-ranging discussion. You know, I've sort of said two things really in sort of the overall context since I sort of took over as leader that I think are sort of important and pertinent to the conversation. The first is that, and as I said sort of at the launch event, you know, it shouldn't have taken events of 4,000 miles away to shine a spotlight on the things that we know that are happening, not just within our communities, but also within our organisations, because we absolutely know what the stats are, and we know what those structural barriers are, and we have had many conversations in the past, in even this forum, about you know, the demographics of our communities, the demographics of people who are on our council estates, the demographics of people who are on our housing waiting lists, the demographics of people who are in receipt of in-work benefit, the issues of sort of stark inequality in life expectancy and wealth and income. And it's absolutely Black and minority ethnic communities and Asian communities that are on the harsh receiving end. And we know that absolutely that we are underrepresented. We have a situation where Black and Asian minority ethnic communities are overwhelmingly overrepresented in some of those statistics, yet like overwhelmingly underrepresented both in terms of our senior leadership, upper management, and equally amongst councillors. And you know, we absolutely know that we have to do something about it, but we also have to be able to be brave and have those conversations. And it's why the administration and the new administration has put so much emphasis on sort of fighting inequality as one of the 3 corporate priorities, because it has to be more than just a slogan that goes on people's email signatures. Like, it has to be meaningful and it has to mean something. But we also know that like we can't mark our own homework. You know, that's what this meeting is for, and that's the role of trade unions in terms of keeping us honest and keeping us on our toes. But it's equally the expectations that will be kept from us externally to the organisation too. So the idea, and you know, we toyed around with the name quite a lot to try and figure out how we could sort of convey the notion of both equality but also justice, insofar as you know, we can't be expected to mark our homework in a year's time. We can put an action plan together. We can try and make it really clear that we want to take meaningful action, or that we're going to put the resources behind taking meaningful action. We can put together an action plan that's got times against it, that's got sort of concrete, clear evidence of what it is that we're going to do. But ultimately, somebody else needs to mark our homework, and we'll support it and we'll resource it to make sure it happens. But sort of following that theme of justice, well, it needs to be an external panel, just like the commission was independent and external to the council, supported by us, yes, but totally independent, that in a year's time can look at our action plan, can look at all the things that I said on behalf of the organisation and test them. And if they find us wanting, and they find that we haven't made that type of progress, then of course they should be able to go through that process again. They should be able to say all the things that they need to say about us. If they need to critique it, then they'll absolutely have the right and the responsibility to critique it. But we're also going to protect it. So, you know, we're going to write that into the council's rules, if you like, to protect it and to make sure that, you know, there's no squirming out of enabling that to happen in a year's time. Because ultimately, if we were, this can't just be another action plan. It can't just be another set of Gantt charts. It can't just be another sort of yearly or quarterly report that comes to cabinet that we sort of note and spend a couple of minutes looking at and, sort of congratulating ourselves for making progress. It needs the sort of daylight, sunlight scrutiny that only a proper process that can sort of bring to it. And that action plan, it's not just going to be about the community elements to this. This isn't just going to be about what we do in terms of council services and with residents. It's also going to be about how we tackle these issues internally within our staff, but also importantly within the culture of the organisation too, and about how we change that and how we improve it for the better. Mary?
I think we all welcome that, and let's all hope that we can all go on that journey together. So yeah, thank you. I think that was really powerful what you said, and maybe we'll hold you to it, Peter, and we'll be coming back and asking for more. I'd just say one thing to Liz. Just say the issue around exit interviews is, could you tell what you've just said to us, to all your colleagues? Because unfortunately, I've got members who have contacted HR to ask them if they can do an exit interview, and they are told to go away. They're told, no, go away. We don't do anything like that. And they won't be shifted. Even when I've asked them, they will not be shifted. So there's a really strange message going out. I know that we haven't agreed the process completely, but we shouldn't be dismissive to staff. If somebody asks for something, we need to be positive with them and not just telling them to go away, which is what we're doing.
Yeah, totally agree, Mary. We'll make sure we get some messaging out. Maybe that's why quite a few people contact me, because I wouldn't ever turn anyone down. But we'll make sure that other colleagues and I make sure that everyone's clear that that's fine, whilst we put in place some sort of more agreed formal process, which will be imminent. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Mary, do you want to come in? I see your
Yeah, I'll be quick. Yeah, I was nodding my head because it happened to me as well a few times, and I had to find a way around it. And the way I found was just to go contact the head of service. And luckily for me, the head of service was happy to do the exit interview. But Mary's quite right. I did reach out to HR as well, and But anyway, the only other thing I wanted to suggest, or maybe add, is, or to be mindful of, is with the exit interview. I know you mentioned a survey, but I'm not 100% sure that a lot of people will be comfortable to complete a survey. Would there be another avenue of, if they don't complete that survey? That's one. And then you mentioned after the survey, after they have the exit interview, you didn't really mention anything about what will happen. I mean, how would you treat the content of what they discuss with you? How would you make sure it's been dealt with, and then we don't have to come back to it again?
Okay, so I think we'd be happy to offer people that don't want to fill in survey a conversation still, and that's fine as well. We were trying to make it accessible for people that might want to do it in two ways, and that's fine. I think a lot of people that I've spoken to don't want to be identified. They want us to know where the areas of issues are, so that we can consider, I can consider with colleagues where we need to focus. But they don't want to identify themselves, and they don't want us to say who it was that said what, because they are concerned about references for the future. So if they come back and ask for a reference, people are concerned about that. So I think we need to protect confidentiality, but we can take action behind the scenes, and we can have those conversations if we've got particular issues with a manager. I know myself and the business partners on the call today here would be not afraid to have a conversation with relevant line managers about any issues of concerns. And there are patterns sometimes, you get a number of people leave from a particular area. You are going to start to think it's not about career progression. Maybe there's an issue about the skills of that manager or what's going on in that service. So we can pinpoint some of these things, and we are happy to tackle them. But sometimes we can't be transparent about how we tackle them, because we'd be naming individuals about what they said and line managers. But we can certainly and have taken action before.
Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, really building on Liz's point, I think in terms of the work that all of us on this meeting do, if we had to depend on the content of exit interviews to understand how the organisation is working, then I guess we'd all have failed in some way. You know, it's a tool. It's almost the tool of last resort. You know, and I think the value of an online survey is that it gives the element of anonymity that people have fed back that they would like to see. It obviously takes away the idea of the kind of iterative conversation where you can say, well, why is that? Or can you give me a big example? Or when did, you know, but really we should be having, we should all in our different ways be able to spot what's going on and have the conversations collectively and individually, you know, through the usual channels to dig these things out, because none of us wants to see malpractice or poor management. You know, I think, you know, you sign up to be a manager, you sign up to a set of responsibilities in how you deal with people, and I believe that very strongly. So we give the best opportunities to people to feed back, but if they only tell us that something's gone wrong as they're leaving, then we've got something more serious that we need to be fixing, all of us.
Adam?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there's a commitment to share the key findings of the Woolley report, the Commissioner's report, with staff from the bottom up, because obviously we were talking about managers, etc., and the organisation, but I think it's really important that this is from the bottom up and everyone gets an opportunity to understand what's been found in the organisation, what the issues are, and what we can individually and collectively within our teams do to change the culture in the organisation.
My mouse disappeared from the screen just momentarily. You know, the short answer is yes, and that work we're going to develop because you know we saw the Commission's report properly for the first time as an organisation literally when it landed. You know, it was independent, so you know the demands that are in the report are as fresh to us as they are to the Commission in terms of the way that they've landed. We need a bit of time to reflect on that report, but so that it can go into the action plan. And what the action plan will do is make really, really clear sort of what the responses are. And if you've you know, had the opportunity to sort of look at it, you'll know, that there are things in there, and there are things that reflect some of the observations even that the new administration has made about the way that we engage with residents and the prevailing method of sort of how we talk about really difficult topics and how we talk about significant changes that happen in how we deliver services, how we engage people in understanding the challenges that we've got around things like budgets, how people feel, you know, how people feel and respond both emotionally and physically to difficult things and difficult decisions that we have to make even on an individual and case-by-case basis, and making sure that we're not just sort of, you know, listening to, particularly to Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities when they tell us things about the inequalities that exist within our communities, but that we actually do some stuff about it. Now that's as much about strong political leadership and strong organizational leadership to make what we do different and changing culture, but that's taking, as you rightly say, everybody on that journey from top to bottom, and you know, we're not going to let up on that. So you know, this isn't going anywhere. We will develop it. We'll do it with staff. We'll do it with both, you know, leadership, senior leadership, and frontline, and everybody in between, so that, you know, this can be a proper and meaningful conversation. Because what we're not going sort of back to, and we can't go back to, is not talking about difficult topics or not trying to find the compromises that we need to make to improve the situation, because we've been trying that for 100 years and it clearly hasn't been working.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, any more on this one?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
No worries. Do you want to take us to the next one? Or
Yeah, well, it was well-being and mental health, but I'm not sure. I think that we may have touched on some of those bits on the basis of the staff survey, and that we're going to be looking at those things. I think that I think that a point that we need to. I think that on the next area is there's lots of different bits, but specifically, I think that we'd like just to raise our concerns really about COVID and things like that, the things that we haven't referred to. Specifically, we've been raising, and I think that we don't feel that we're getting very far, but there's still lots of issues around it, and there's inequality in the way that people are being treated for long COVID. So without, we've raised this, I think, loads of times about that we believe there should be some distinct guidance come out from the centre in ensuring that people are treated in a fair manner, that are returning to work, specifically with long COVID. And we don't feel the HR's approach back to us has been, well, at the moment we're dealing with it on a case-by-case basis, but that means that it's only the cases that get highlighted are getting, you're challenging that. And we know just this week, we're aware where a manager is going, I don't see why that you should get any better treatment because you're coming back from long COVID and things like that. But that member is a Unison member. And so you can imagine that we're picking that up. But we still want that something clearly coming out about how managers manage people with COVID. Because Danny, I'm sure, is going to mention, we've been asking that if you can do something corporately, that can also be rolled out to schools, because we have even bigger problem in schools of the dismissive approach that many of our members are feeling when they are trying to get themselves well and trying to get back to work and not being treated in a very fair manner.
Danny's got his hand up. Danny, do you want to come in and then on this and anybody else? Then I think Liz might be able to sort of respond in terms of where we are on the sector-wide guidance on this, and we'll talk about it a bit more.
Happy to do that. Thank you. Yeah, I thought I'd save this now rather than raise it earlier because it was on this part of the agenda. Yeah, Mary is right, and I'm not trying to say that this is endemic across schools. Thankfully, in terms of proportionate, the proportion of staff that are in schools, it's not the main reason that people are absent, but it is significant, and it is becoming bigger and bigger. We're getting more and more casework, and what we're finding is that, from my perspective, employers, and I'm talking about head teachers here and managers, deputy heads, who are asked to lead this sickness absence process, don't really understand how to treat long COVID in terms of, do I make an occupational health referral? Is this just a cold that somebody has? Does it matter that they contracted this, COVID potentially at work or not? What reasonable adjustments do I need to make? I've heard from more than one head teacher over the past 3 months that a phased return is between 4 and 6 weeks, and that is that. And that's not true. And that's going to potentially land the local authority in legal jeopardy, because obviously you can't just dismiss the fact that people have a condition which requires increased support. And so the reason that Mary has raised this again on our behalf, and that we as a union are raising it again, is because we think that this type of guidance is not just going to benefit our members, but the school more generally. Because again, 3 cases in particular in one school, where the school have it pushed too hard, too fast, and the people have had to stop their phased return because they've just been pushed to the point where they're not ready to be on those full hours. They're ready to gradually, slowly build up to the hours and see how things are going. but we are concerned that that is becoming more and more prevalent, and potentially, you know, we've just been talking about the Race Equality Commission and having a borough that values fairness, and potentially we're seeing people being discriminated against on the grounds of disability, because these particular members are able to show that this has been going on for a year or more, or is likely to go on for a year or more. So it is really important, and I do think we need some specific guidance, because even our own school policy on managing absence doesn't have enough about disability and has nothing about non-COVID at this time.
Liz, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, just touching on the schools front, I am aware of some draft guidance which is with the trade unions, and I don't know if that's helpful or not yet, about reintegrating staff back into the workplace after long COVID. And I think
that's right, Liz, it is there. I do accept that. Actually, I should have mentioned that there is some work going on that's joint for us in schools. I know that corporately that's slightly different, and maybe it's a reversal this time, where there might be a school's bit of guidance first that the authority can adopt, but we would like it to be stronger in terms of making employers aware that phased returns don't have to have a certain limitation, and that, you know, it has to be driven by medical guidance much more than it currently is.
Okay. So corporately, we're going to be looking at the guidance that's been prepared for schools as well. I think the big issue, which is about inconsistency of line managers in how they treat people returning, you know, and the reasonable adjustments required. So we know we've got some good practice where managers have been really flexible about the period of time over which somebody returns and whether they need to do more hours, less hours, and that. But I recognise it's probably a bit of a gap. So we probably what we'll commit to doing is looking at getting some communications out, which we agree with trade unions, to line managers about our expectations about how they treat people consistently and fairly, and when they should be referring to occupational health, and the fact that, you know, you can't just have one conversation, it's an ongoing conversation with people that have got longer term health issues such as long COVID. So we can get something out to managers, but we'll look at also what Mark's been producing as well, so we can pick that up.
Thanks, Liz. Back to you, Mary, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, we would really welcome that, and we'll look forward to hearing that. Actually, so I've just lost my agenda off my screen, but I don't know that there was anything else on there, was there? I can't think. Have we got to the bottom of our list? Yes, we got to the bottom.
We have, Mary, yeah. There's a few, there's all sorts really on this number 10, aren't there, that we could, the ethical care charter is probably worth asking about, isn't it? We would like an update.
Yeah.
Because we do keep hearing that, you know, we accept you're committed to signing it and want to do that, but I know, Councillor Mason, last time we met here at this meeting, you said sometimes, you know, you just have to do what you know is right, and I think we all know that the right thing to do is to sign up to it and pay. So we would really like to know when that will happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think forgive me, I think I might have sort of just covered it earlier on, just in terms of sort of repeating some of the challenges that you know, and I think we all know that we've got in both both the commitment, but also sort of the practical application. So, you know, we could tomorrow sign the ethical care charter and be in a situation where on paper we're paying the London living wage to all domiciliary care workers and care workers in all of our contracts, but in practical applications, unless every single local authority makes the same commitments to pay the London living wage to every place in which they make placements, then effectively all we're doing is paying a rate that won't be passed on to the actual care workers, and invariably inflate a contract that will see you know, people running private care homes take greater dividend profit in and above what they're already getting now. So that's a practical element. You've heard me say it before, because it's completely true that this is a question of when, not if. And all I'd say is, you know, it is a question of when, not if. And I hope that we'll be sort of making some very clear statements about what that timetable is very, very soon.
Is that in the next few minutes or?
It's not in the next few minutes.
It's not in the next few minutes. Okay, just thought I'd ask.
No, it was good. I mean, look, as I always say, look, hold our feet to the fire on this. We should be accountable. We've made those statements in the past. We've made that commitment. We will do it. And you will continue, I'm sure, to ask us until the moment that we have.
Okay, we welcome those. I think that we do need to have a further conversation, and possibly I need to go back and ask how other local authorities have managed to commit to something, but they must have similar situations as yourself. And then how do that, I know that it's something that Houston has raised nationally about what is the commitment and how are we monitoring those who have committed to it, and how are we? So there's lots of questions, but I think that we welcome your honesty about it. That it's it's right, but it's difficult to do, and I understand.
And brass tacks, Mary. Like we sort of do have a rule, don't we? Sort of we have a rule. One doesn't criticise another administration in another location's decisions in terms of what they do or present to the public. But I don't want to lead you down a garden path. I don't want to say something to you and commit to doing something that's not deliverable. And then in a year's time, you say to me, Councillor Mason, for goodness sake, you signed the ethical care charge and you said that everybody was in receipt of the London living wage, but actually, here's a care worker in a care home in your borough that isn't receiving the London living wage, and we'll have to then go backwards and say, well, we made the commitment, we're giving the care home the money, but actually he's not passing it on to the care worker. That's crap. You don't want to hear that, and that's not where we need to be. Does mean the agency is still on us, right? It is my responsibility. It's Steve's responsibility. It's Josh's responsibility as a cabinet member for Healthy Lives to make sure that we are making those arguments within the West London Alliance and within our colleagues, so that we can be in a situation where it's not a question of one or two sort of stray local authorities who aren't moving with the pack on this. Because ultimately we all do need to work together. Now, again, let's look at where we might be in 4 years' time around, say, for example, specialist adult social care placements. Some of the most trickier bits of the market that the market doesn't want to do because it's difficult, tricky, and they've realised that there's not much profit in it. Right? We might not have choices soon enough about what we do with some of that care placements in terms of who runs it, public or private sector. And likewise, on the London living wage, we talked about agency workers earlier on. Well, I think we all know that there aren't enough people to do an awful lot of jobs, and London living wage, probably in an era of inflation of 5%, right, is just going to mean that people follow high pay where they can get decent pay, and that might theoretically, practically do an awful lot for increasing people's rates of pay. But it's, and those who don't treat this seriously are going to be the ones that don't have people working in their care homes or delivering care in people's homes. So that is the direction of travel. But I'm always going to be honest with you. I'm not going to sort of flannel you on what's difficult, but needs to change.
Okay, thank you. I think that we completed our bit on the agenda. And I know there's the mandatory bit that I'll make comments and when we come to that.
Yeah, let's go back to my agenda. Okay, so are we sort of happy to say that we've sort of taken the update on non-standard workers? We did that as part of 6. Workforce equality update. So again, we covered a little bit of that, but is there any more on that you want to discuss?
No, not from our perspective. I think that we've covered that and everything.
Yeah. Okay, so health and safety update then.
So perhaps if I can just come in briefly on that. I know that trade unions are involved in coming to the Directorate Health and Safety meetings, as well as the corporate health and safety meeting now. we know we have some challenges ahead on health and safety fronts. I just probably wanted to focus in perhaps on the workforce piece, and it sort of links back to the wellbeing and mental health. So we have done some work, and there was a report to senior leadership team on mental health and anxiety related issues, and the high numbers of days and people off with these things over the last couple of years. So I was back at senior leadership team with a report asking about putting on additional resources. So this is paid for counselling for people. It's additional workshops for both staff and managers on a range of fronts, some things that we already deliver. And it's also about training up mental first aid champions in the workforce. So all those recommendations were agreed, and the resourcing had come out of some external budget that's sitting in adults that we're able to access that hasn't all been spent yet. So it's something that if we don't spend it, we'll lose it anyway, and we can use it for the good of the workforce. So that's certainly one of the things. I'm just waiting to confirm the funding, and then we'll be doing some communications about the opportunities and what we're doing with that as well. So it's a bit of a focus on workforce more than anything for me today.
Okay, Danny.
Thank you. Just a quick one. I think we raised it at the last meeting, if not the one before. But it would be very helpful within the children and adults health and safety remit if we could. Currently, the figures that we get are quarterly. So each 3 months we get the figures, which means really we're 3 months behind. So if we had a meeting in January, we would hear about accidents or incidents or riddles or whatever that had happened back in as late as September. So we would really like to have a change to that, where we could see the information reported in a more live way, weekly, bi-week, fortnightly or monthly. So I don't know, Liz, if you've had a chance to consider that or talk to health and safety colleagues, but we think it would be really helpful from our side as a trade union group for our members, but also for employees, so that we can actually manage health and safety in a better way.
I know we're certainly committed to that, and also updating you on resources for schools on mental and health wellbeing as well. The accidents one is a bit of a challenge for my team at the moment, the corporate health and safety team, because we're struggling to resource our team at the moment. So I would like to get to the point where we can provide more live data, but we actually are struggling to get people to work in the team at the moment. So we need to try resolve that. So we're out to recruit at the moment, but we actually even struggle to get agency workers in our health and safety team at the moment. So our issue is about resources as well at the moment, but we'll see what we can do. It's not forgotten. Keep it on the agenda. As soon as we are able to provide quicker data more often, we will. At the moment, I think it's probably a struggle providing the quarterly data as well.
We have just had the children and adults meeting this afternoon, and actually the data was better than it had been previously, because it ran up right up until the end of December. So we were looking at, right at the end of January, first day of February, we were looking at data that was right up until then and everything. And in some areas we were looking at it that was only 10 days old and things like that. So up until then. So it was better. I think there is various improvement, but we still need to keep working on it.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. You need the data sooner rather than later. I mean, it's challenging because on sickness absence of the workforce, I can log in at any time for the corporate workforce and see exactly what the live situation is. But we need to get to a point maybe where we can get some automated reports out the system a bit quicker from the health and safety side. But it's something Samara and I have had on the agenda. So. But as I said, we struggle with team members ourselves in that area, and there's lots of other. I'm not saying these are not important issues, but there's lots of pressing issues across the whole health and safety agenda at the moment.
Okay, I'll go back to my agenda.
I've got my hand up. I just.
Oh, sorry, Kevin, I didn't see it. I've got one eye on my agenda and one eye on the
It's all right.
screen.
It's all right. It's to Liz anyway. You mentioned about mental health champion. could you just break that down? I know I keep saying break it down. It's just to get a better understanding. Could you just break that down? In what area would they be able to support? How will people be able to get hold of them? And what exactly would they be? How would they be supporting?
Yeah, so there's formal training. There's normally a 2-day course for people. We're opening it up to the workforce. We're going to fund a number of places for people to do the 2-day training. And that means, and then we will promote those people as people in the services. So we need to spread it across the different directorates, that if someone's having some difficulties and wants to talk to someone that's been trained by professionals in supporting people, we don't expect people to be experts, but somebody that will listen to what they have to say, help signpost them to relevant resources and that. So I've been on the training before, and it provides you with enough knowledge about different symptoms and things that people might display in the workplace, and the sorts of conversations you should have with those people and the sorts of things that you should be signposting to. It works really well in lots of organisations. We did do some training before, but I think most of the people that have been trained aren't with the organisation anymore. So we'll offer that up as an open opportunity for people to apply for places across the directorates at any level, and we'll fund as many places as we can. And then we can promote them, we can share that information and say, these are some of your go-to people if you want a confidential conversation. And it might be a manager's got a member of staff, and they might go to their champion and say, look, I'm really struggling. I think my member of staff's struggling, will you have a conversation with them? So I think there's lots of opportunity. It is a subject area that's, I think, quite difficult to talk about in the workforce, but you need to talk about it, and we need to have people that feel comfortable talking about it. So that's the plan, as soon as I've got funding sorted.
Okay, just one more question on that. If you are going to, I assume you're going to do recruitment internally as well. And if that's the case, how would that balance with people that are already in employment? Would they be given time out to do it, or how would that?
Yeah, I mean, people have to be given some time, don't they, to do it. So first of all, we'll get agreement to release people on the training, and secondly, the expectation will be that when they need to take an hour or 2 hours, to go and talk to someone, that we allow that to happen as well. That's the whole point of having the resource. So I think it's about making sure that we get enough people shared across the different services. So there's there's go-to people shared across the services. But we're certainly going to do a pilot program and have a go at it. It worked really well before when we did it, but it was a long time ago that we did it.
Liz, could I just ask a quick question on that? Obviously, people who are trained and named first aiders receive an allowance. Are you thinking that if you're mental health first aid trained, that you would receive a monthly allowance as well, or?
Probably not at this point in time, because I think probably we've got people that do it informally already for us, but happy to consider it.
Yeah, it just came into my head now, so I thought I'd put it on record there to see if maybe
I think it's a development opportunity for people as well, and they can use it in their personal lives as well as in their work lives. I mean, I participated in it a long time ago in Ealing, and my expectation was it equipped me as a line manager as much as anything and when you work in the HR space, people tell you some quite difficult stories, and it equipped me to deal with and to support people that had difficult stories, and I felt equipped to do it. And I think that's probably what we're looking to do. I think if you need any serious support, we'll probably refer people to occupational health and the professionals. We've got other resources for mental, but this is sort of the ad hoc stuff in the workplace that you need to pick up there and then. To be quite honest, the longer term stuff we can pick up via occupational health. We've got Able Futures, got workplace options, we've got a range of things. But this is, someone needing a conversation in the here and now, on that day, in that hour.
Okay, any more on that? Okay, sorry, just going back to the screen. So let's do mandatory vaccination policy. So I'm just thinking about who's best to sort of kick this off. Liz, do you want to?
If Sharon's on the call, she might just run us through where we are.
Yeah.
Sharon, are you still with us?
given the sort of the moving picture that it is. So, are you there, Sharon?
Sorry, I was just trying to take my mic off. Hi, everyone.
Go ahead.
I did try and click my camera off, but it's not coming off for some reason. So it's been great to see you all today and interesting hearing you all talk about the things. And I wanted to just start out with, firstly, to say thanks to Sukhminder for helping to coordinate this policy with his unison colleagues and with GMB. So really the policy is just for noting. It was originally created to take into account government changes where they brought in regulations for care homes and CQC registered or regulated activities. So we've worked really quite hard to get this policy pulled together and support the workforce, and it's already been implemented in short breaks, which is our only home that we have in-house. And then the next step really from the 1st of April was to bring it in for reablement. But literally hot off the press from almost yesterday, we're still not really clear about it, but it looks like the government are looking to do a change in decision, and that's got to go through a parliamentary process. So at the moment, we're expecting something to maybe come out in the next couple of days, but the message is don't do anything just yet. So don't give anyone notice to quit, because technically speaking, from Thursday, if any worker hasn't got their first jab, then they're unlikely to be able to work after the 1st of April. So people like the NHS were all getting ready to set up, to sort of issue notice to employees. And so now the government's just said, hold on, don't do that. And it looks like they're going to revoke it. But what we don't know is whether it's just going to be NHS based or whether it's going to include the social care element, and or whether they might revoke what we've already put in place in care homes. So we're sort of, the policy was coming here to be noted. It's been agreed and consulted on, but now it looks like we might not need it. And that's
Eric,
it for me,
go ahead.
I think.
Okay, yeah. As Sharon said, we've been heard well, we've listened, we've fed in, and it's been fine. We don't like the legislation where we've been forced into this situation, but that's where we are. I had a conversation not only with Keith yesterday and with Sharon about what do we do based on our indecisive government and its behaviour at the moment. And my view is that we have to adopt it, because currently we have got staff who are actually already part of this policy and things like that. So we needed to have a policy, but the minute we have a clarification on what's going forward, we would obviously want to reopen our discussions with the employer about what those changes are and how they're affected and things like that. Obviously, we want to drive towards nobody being put at risk of their employment because of this mandatory position. And and then maybe knock-ons. It all depends what the government decides, doesn't it? We don't know what they're going to decide to do. Will they go as far as what Sharon said? Are they going to revoke everything, or are they not? Nobody knows, do they? So I think at the moment. So yeah, happy to agree that we note the policy, but we keep lines of communication open on the basis of once we know what's happening.
Thank you. Okay. So unless there is any more, don't see any hands going up. Danny's come off of mute, but I don't know if that means he's going to make a contribution. I think
just in readiness to say goodbye, really.
Well, the date
I spoke too soon.
Ready? You ready for it? Ready to come off that button, Danny? The date of the next meeting is not yet determined, but of course we will be in touch to find a mutually convenient date. So with that, Danny?
Oh, I forgot my line now.
See you later.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good evening. All right. See you soon.